For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. My name is Isaiah Famurewa.
And I'm Liz Famurewa, formerly known as Elisa de Yuzi Nosotros Diaz.
And we've been married for a total of 6 whole days.
And we figured out the key to marriage.
No, we're not. We're really, really not so experienced. We're still rookies.
Yeah, it's been a long time, you know?
It's felt long sometimes. She's a great cook. Has some gnarly meatballs with this one. Pasta is good. Pass that after.
I'm still trying to get the hang of everything.
How do we like being married?
I think I like it a lot. I think it's more like it's surreal yet. I think I'm kind of still living on like a cloud where I'm like, are we really married? Like, are we really together? I think even sometimes like I was just like chilling there. I'm like, hey, what's up? You're a great friend. But yeah, it feels it's awesome, but it's still surreal. It hasn't fully hit me yet.
It's different with guys. So like, I feel like, for example, with Liz, it's just her and I. So we're able to just kind of keep things organized a little bit better. But it's just different. It's less people, less activity. She's also a female, for goodness sake. So she's very different. Her needs are different. But I feel like I think my mindset is really kind of like changing. Like I have to think about areas where I wouldn't normally think about. Like it's not just me making my own way or my own schedule, but it's really now I have to be I need to be considerate and actually asking questions. And so it's very, very surreal. It's different, but it's almost like I'm learning how to work with a clone who's not exactly a clone, you know what I mean? But a partner. So it's really cool. I'm excited to see what God does, through it. Like, as it says in Ecclesiastes 4, 2 is better than 1. So I'm just excited to see what ways like 2 is better than 1 looks like. What did we like, or how do we feel about our wedding? First of all, I was just very, very encouraged. Number one, like the first thing that stood out was how God made nature look beautiful. And, I'd never been to an outside wedding, but it was just perfect. The weather was perfect. It just seemed like everything was greener. It was like perfectly green. It was like it was well decorated. I really honestly just want to lift up just the sisters who worked hard on the decorations. Christina literally created these wooden decorations with these phrases that were very, very, very unique to Liz and I's relationship. She took twigs and leaves and made like this hanging. Like it was just honestly beautiful. It really, what stuck out to me was just the fact that like this was quality, heartfelt effort, and in the world people would pay tens of thousands to have that kind. But we didn't need to do that, and I really just felt encouraged by God. I want to lift up the Suarez's and the Cruzes. They had so much food. Like by the time Liz and I left, there was like literally 20 trays left to go. Honestly, the wedding was just like everyone gave their whole heart. Everyone had fun, and I could see that even in little ways my physical family was impacted. And so honestly, it was just beautiful. I love just how the groomsmen, those were disciples, and my family just meshed together. It was really, really, really fun, and we looked great too. The colors were awesome. So honestly, like this was a wedding where God's hand was involved. He moved people and he moved circumstances, and that's really what stood out to me.
I was really impacted just by the disciples. When I think of the disciples, like obviously I think of the body of Christ, but I felt like it was really weird. I felt like I got to see like the liver working and the heart working and the hands working and the feet working. And it was funny because I was totally spaced. I totally forgot to bring any food with me on the trip. And it's cool because like I was never hungry. I was always fed. And I think one of the most impactful moments for me It was during the reception, and Maria, like, I went to go talk to Maria, and she pulls me to the side. She's like, I thought to myself, if I was your mother and your mother was here, how would she want the food to be? And it obviously showed that she took personal responsibility for me when she didn't have to, but like, it just impacted me so much because it showed in the food. Like, there was a massive amount. I love food, so it was great. And so I was just so impacted just by her words, because like, it was just such an intimate moment, a private moment, that it was so special. Again, it did seem like the water was clear on the wedding day. It seemed like the air was nice and crisp and clean, and there was no weird smell of the lake. So I kind of felt like I was in La La Land. It was pretty great.
What if we learned through our dating relationship, our engagement, up until the wedding day, and about God?
Well, I think I'm a very impatient person. I've learned that, and it's really funny because when we first started dating, we got some of the married couples gave us like scriptures to kind of encourage us, like, okay, hey, like, remember this about your scripture, this. But the one that stood out to me the most is love is patient, and she didn't even write anything else. Like, none of the, like, not even the rest of the scripture of 1 Corinthians 13. It's just love is patient, and I still have that note, and I just keep it there, and I'm like, okay. Every day I would have to tell myself, love is patient, love is patient, love is patient. I mean, we dated for 3 years. I had to be patient. But it was like, I realized that the pattern in my life is when I don't see something like that God is doing. Like, I mean, I took care of myself my life. Like, I didn't have to rely on anyone or wait on anyone. But for the first time, I was having to do that not only with God, like, but also now even with my relationship with Isaiah. And it was stressful because I like being in control and impatient. But I think something I learned about myself is I don't like waiting, but it could also affect me in a way where it's like, hey, you missed out on the very best things because you didn't wait. So I think that's a huge lesson I learned from myself.
For me, I would say the dating relationship really taught me, like, I need Liz, but it was more that I needed friendship. At that point in time, like, Liz was like a best friend. She was the first person. I remember saying this in my vows to her on the wedding day. She was the first person to come and really basically be like, I want to be a friend. I'm like, who just goes with people and says that? This is weird. But I had to learn, like, it wasn't really about like the romance, but really about like friendship. And what I learned was that her needs may not necessarily in the moment to me from the way I was thinking. I had a very worldly perspective. My perspective was like, success, personal success, and productivity comes before people. But I've learned actually, my relationships come before my productivity and my success. And I was very, very, very neglectful a lot of times as we were dating. Like, she was kind of in a corner struggling. Like, of course I couldn't fix her, but like, I wouldn't even pay much attention. Her needs were kind of very, wishful to me. They were very, very like silly. But I learned that actually, just because they're different doesn't mean they're weird or silly. They're important. I need to learn. And so I learned how to be sensitive. I learned how to be sympathetic. I learned how to be a friend who doesn't need to be a problem fixer, but just to be a listening friend. And even up to the point of the engagement, one of the most, like, I felt like it was very useless because I didn't have a lot of responsibility. I'm like, shoot, I learned how to, like, I appreciate how much women have to do to plan their weddings. It's a lot. But I think the most important thing I learned in our engagement was just that, number one, you had to keep things pure. We're engaged, we're not married yet. But number two, providing this spiritual vision for Liz, or like, hey, just helping her to see what God's doing. Not taking things personally. Like, a lot of times I can take her emotions, her responses to what God is doing personally as if I'm like, why are you mad at me? But it's realizing she's just mad, I'm just in the way. So I learned that a lot, and even up to the day of our marriage, I think on the wedding day, I saw the value of waiting on God's timing.
What have I learned about God? I think during dating and just growing as a disciple, I'm actually coming up on 5 years, so I'm really excited. But I think it's that my God is my own. I know that sounds really weird, but I think a lot of times, like, we know God is the God of everyone, He cares for everyone, but that there's a personal, intimate relationship there. Like, when you feel like your needs aren't being met, or you don't feel like you're special, it's because you're not special to God first. Understand how special you are to God. Feel these googly little butterflies, and it's just so special because most of the time in the world, like, I was looking for a relationship that like would fill me, and that person would be my googly butterfly person. And I'm grateful that now, like, Isaiah's not like, I love Isaiah, like he gives me butterflies, but he's not that person that I rely on for everything. And so that why it's my favorite thing that I learned about God is because he's my googly butterfly person. He's my first love. Like, he's the one that's loved me first, and so I will always like have a first love throughout the rest of my life.
I think the one thing that keeps coming to my mind repetitively is God the provider. A lot of, like, for example, like, we started dating, and at that time I didn't, like, it was nice to have a girlfriend, but I didn't feel like I needed one, you know, but like God provided a girlfriend. Then, you know, last year in 2020, I was able to make a lot more money than I used to, and so God just put in my heart, I just started, like, something just said, okay, start saving. And so even like asking Liz, my plan was to ask her and marry her at a different time. But my plan was to originally marry her in August. We get married in June because we're, you know, to live by faith and rely on God. And so everything was just God the provider. And I think that God has not just provided Liz, but he's provided circumstances for things about me that I didn't even think were important to look into. Like, God's like, I need you to have perseverance. I need you to have patience. You know, going through ups and downs financially, going through ups and downs personal ministry, like my dreams being fulfilled or not happening. And I'm like, God has just been providing either through lessons or through people for areas of my life that I didn't even care investigating.
I think the funniest thing that I learned about Isaiah is the fact that, like, he has his random, like, urges where he's like, I want candy, and he'll buy like 6 bags of candy,
6 Reese's
and
bars.
then he'll go, and then next thing he's like, I want soda, and he buys a whole pack of soda for himself. I'm like, oh, can I have one? He's like, oh yeah, I didn't think of that. He's like, he does all these things. He has so much, like, a variety of like food or like drink. And he's like, do you want anything? And it's like those funny movies where it's like, yeah, I'll take 26 cheeseburgers. Did you want something? It just makes me laugh because I'm like, oh my gosh, like, are you okay? Are you hungry? And then he's like, oh, I shouldn't have bought it. And then he throws it all away, and I'm like, oh my gosh. So it makes me laugh because rash decisions make me laugh.
I think the funniest thing that I've learned is just how, like, Liz can be like easily bothered by what I do or who I am, but then she'll always come back kind of like, she kind of reminds me of a Care Bear, where, you know, it's kind of like, I don't like that decision. Okay, oh, I want cuddles. You know, like Liz really, like, she loves physical touch, and she loves, like, you know, my presence. And it's funny because it's kind of like who wants to be around someone this much? Like, what is it about me? Like, why? Like, what do you see that I don't see? You know, but I think that's one of the funny things I've seen about Liz is that she's just kind of like a Care Bear. She's very gentle, very loving, and sometimes she'll kind of like flex on you a little bit, but she just wants cuddles. That's one thing that's been funny for me. What do I want to share with other disciples? Doesn't have to be dating advice or marriage advice. You have the best life that anyone wants. I think that's something that honestly God has taught me. And even just thinking through, my happiness as a married man hasn't really, like, it hasn't changed because marriage wasn't supposed to make me happier. And I think there's one thing that I want to encourage just everyone to really focus on is that changing the world isn't going to happen overnight. It's changing you being changed and changing one soul at a time. Number 2, like, if God isn't enough for you, like, nothing else will be. Like, make God everything you need and all that you want. And it's very, very simple. It's available at your fingertips. You just have to go after it. And so if there's one thing I would like to share is just honestly, like, you have the best life, and it's because you have God.
I think for me, like, what I would tell disciples, old, new, I think it's the fact that, like, no one can live out your relationship with God for you.
Yeah.
Your relationship with God is genuinely your own.
Yeah.
It's not your spouse's, it's not your friends, it's not the person that baptized you. Like, your faith should not be reliant on anyone else but what you've seen through God. Your proof, your everything, the reason why you do everything should come from because you've seen it from God. Because God has proven to you, like, hey, like, I know I can do this, and I've done this for you. And the truth is, like, it's your choice every day. You gotta choose whether you're gonna believe and be convinced that God loves you that much. If you're not convinced, then that's on you. You can't. I've tried it. I tried telling God, like, no, God, this is your fault. And, like, it's so funny because, like, it just doesn't work. Like, it's not God's fault as much as you want it to be. It will always be your own fault if you decide to leave God. But just know that God's always there. Like, he never closes his door for you. He might close doors that maybe that won't suit you or that maybe aren't good for you. But he never closes his personal door. Like, the door to his heart and is always open. It's just questioning yourself, like, is the door to your heart open for him? And so I want to encourage you all, like, just love God, trust God, look to God. Like, God is your idol. God is your God. Yeah. He is your Lord. He is your Savior. Like, he is, like, everything all in one. And so just focus on him. Don't lose sight of that.
Yeah, and just even to add on to what Liv said, like, I think one thing that really comes to mind as well, too, is, like, what feels good or what feels like is beneficial is not what is beneficial. And, like, God leads us not based on how we feel, but he leads us based on his word. And so, like, yeah, you know, I know we dated for 3 years and stuff, but my happiness does not come from being together with Liz. It is a happy thing. It's awesome. But happiness will come from only God. And if we feel like we want to date because we want to be happy, Satan will turn that thing into a great amusement park. And so God is all you need, and God is more than all you need. And everything else, a wife, a girlfriend, or a boyfriend, is simply a cherry on top. And so that's a choice we all got to make, and that's when we can change the world.
It's not even a cherry, it's like a sprinkle.
It's a sprinkle on the top.
Like, it's great to be married, it's great to, like, date, but man, like, compared to the whole Sunday, like, the ice cream that God is, like,
he's chocolate.
He's a sprinkle. He's a great sprinkle, but he's a sprinkle.
High five. How you did it? Yay.